What I hear is a lot of, so you both talk a lot about the context, the communal context actually of learning happening in groups. How can you relate this to, so wouldn't you need a lot of fMRI scans at the same time, having all these different people in the fMRI and then have this conversation like where, how do you translate this? Because in an fMRI you create the learning context for one single brain, I guess. Yeah. And so how do you translate this kind of communal issues into your setup?
Yeah, that's tricky, but what I try to do then, if I would want to look at how this group dynamics would work in the brain, basically, I would try to do a manipulation. That's actually something we're considering to do right now. Okay. To do a manipulation in which you have a group of participants, they undergo fMRI scans all individually, but for half of the group you tell them, okay, you're now learning together with a group. For example, half of what you have to learn you do yourself. The other half is presented to you by someone else who was controlling it, who was working with you. Or you tell them basically, okay, you do half of it yourself and the other half is presented to you by the computer, for example. So then I would try to make this basic manipulation of being in a group or belonging to a group, a sense of relatedness versus not. And then see how that differs in terms of neural mechanisms. Yeah.
So that would be a great feedback into your program later on.
Definitely.
Yeah. So we only got to know about this today, actually. And then
we talked about
it, and we were like, when are you going to do this?
That's great.
So you have a lot of collaboration, especially for this year.
Yeah, you also had your insights into uncertainty, and I was like, can I please look into that? So there's, I think, a lot of connection points, even though we come from very different backgrounds, but which actually I find really interesting, that even though we come from different backgrounds and we do quite different research, we arrive to the same concept. So then how I make sense of that is that education is always about, or the learning concepts are always the same.
I think you're touching a very relevant point, that is doing research on learning and doing research with people that have a real different background to connect different worlds and different frames of learning, and maybe that is why you have, although you have such a different background, so much in common in a way. How would you translate these experiences to educational research that we want to do or doing in higher education, for instance with the teachers?
Yeah, what I like, but it's really practical. What I like right now is that every time I interview with a teacher about their teacher practices on how they guide these creative processes, is that they are educators, but they're researchers themselves as well, whether that's educational or domain specific. And we, every time after an interview, we're also just discussing how it was, and they came with so many additional tips, like, have you thought about this? And you know, for example, so I really get the perspective of the teacher, how the teacher guide the process. But what we realized throughout the interview is that the moments that students really discuss together, like, what kind of ideas do we want to move forward? So what are the innovative ideas we want to implement? That is actually something that the teachers not always sees, because then they talk with stakeholders, they talk with each other. So then teachers often also, you know, together we actually concluded, okay, maybe I should also talk with some other stakeholders and more with the students as well. So I think the research that we do can actually be shaped together with educators as well, because there's so much valuable knowledge that we don't per se see. Yeah. So I would see it like that.
And in this way, your research is also an intervention, isn't it? Yes.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, yeah.
And can you translate this into, so not just the interaction with the teachers and with teaching and educators, but also having a kind of view of how this will contribute to the TLC's ambitions to turn Radboud University into a learning community itself. So that's where we hope that your research will contribute. How their research together,
Yeah, connect from different backgrounds.
connecting different backgrounds in different research, can contribute to the ambitions. Yeah. So the question that I should like, having heard all this, the question that triggers me a lot is, how could your research in a kind of linking together these very different disciplines contribute to what's actually an ambition of the Teaching and Learning Center, to turn Radboud University itself into a learning community of practice?
I would like to first ask about what is your vision about that learning community of practice? How would you see that?
Yeah. So I was supposed to listen to you rather than speak out what I think is happening. But so this is a very large question, actually. What I just want is that people who are teachers and researchers can remind themselves while teaching of themselves being researchers and having this kind of open, curious and creative mindset while doing what they do. And if there are more than 20,000 students in this university, and there are 5,000 or 6,000 staff, if they all have this kind of open attitude, creative, curious, working together on an uncertain future, that would be my dream, that this all comes together here in the Teaching and Learning Center. And it would be great if your research, because it is about linking together creativity, curiosity, and an uncertain future, and how we adapt to that, and how we together get along with this uncertain future and ourselves.
Can I add on this?
Sure.
It's a very interesting question, and I think except for the curiosity and motivation, the intrinsic motivation, unsecure environments, I think it's the learning community is also a way to connect teachers and persons and researchers from different backgrounds to each other. So it's not just the faculty that binds you as a teacher or a researcher, but it is the basic interest and the questions you have that binds and that connect the teachers. So like you are from different backgrounds and you have maybe a lot of differences because of your the baggage you have, but how to say that? But you have a thing in common, and it is you really want to know and to really understand something and share a lot.